Thank you for coming to my podcast. You can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Nicholas Gertantudo. I'm a real estate investor, serial entrepreneur. I also do work in the realm of finance as a life insurance and wealth management
Hmm.
specialist. And yeah, here I think to talk about more of the real estate side of things.
Right. So how many property you own?
So at this moment, I own two properties, a 6 unit and a 7 unit, as I sold my first, which was an 11 unit in Ontario last September. And
Okay.
yeah, continuous continuing to shop around for more properties. The last couple of years have been a bit of a slump, I would say, just because things got crazy, really heated, and with the Bank of Canada keeping interest rates slightly higher. I mean, they're not at an all-time high or anything. Um, a lot of people have overvalued their property and undervalue the results that those properties can gain.
So like in Ontario, it was in Toronto.
No, it was in Smiths Falls. And then I have the 6 unit is actually in Quebec. It's right across the bridge from Pembroke, Fort Coulonge. And then I have a 7 unit actually in Saskatchewan, in Moose Jaw.
Okay. So one in Ontario, one in Quebec, and one in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, all over the
So
map. I've looked
yeah.
at BC. Um,
Ah.
Also really interested with New Brunswick. New
Mm.
Brunswick, Alberta, and Saskatchewan are still kind of like a gold mine, I guess, or the Wild West, if you want, of real estate. The rules are extremely amenable to landlords. Not that I want anybody to start flooding these places, which it already kind of has, because there's no rent control. There's everything's kind of on the side of the landlord, um, and I am afraid that it will affect well the people there. I don't want people just showing up and all right, $2,000 for rent everywhere.
Right.
Doesn't matter the
Right.
cost or
Right.
you know,
So how
it,
much you
you have
paid
to find a
for?
good. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So how much you paid for the property which was in Ontario? Like how much you bought that
So
property?
yeah, so the original purchase price, when we started negotiations was 900. We talked them down to 769, and then we sold it for 1.3, 2 years
Wow.
after purchase.
So when you bought that,
Um, this would have been around 2019, just prior to the COVID
COVID.
burst. Yeah, just prior to COVID. It hadn't quite dropped yet.
So how much
Yeah.
profit you made like out of like paying all the taxes and everything? 200K?
Um, Well, I mean, so we did a lot of renovations. There was some carrying costs. I think all in all, pretty close to like 350,000
Wow.
in the span of 2 years is really good. My 6 unit, which was one of the first ones that I started managing myself, along with a few partners, um, we spent a good like I want to say 14 months, maybe 15 months negotiating. They originally wanted 250. It was a foreclosure. The roof was leaking. There was a flood in the basement. 2 units were out. Everybody was quite displeased with the property and how it came to. Um, and after the first winter, they were more amenable to our negotiations or requests. We eventually talked them down to 105 for the 6 unit building. Today it's valued at 440. With everybody paying under $1,000. And this ranges from a 2 to a 3 bedroom.
And this one is in Ontario or Quebec?
No, it's yeah, Quebec. It's about half hour. I want to say about a half hour, 45 minutes from Pembroke.
Okay, and how long is from Montreal?
Um, so I think it's about an hour and a half from Ottawa, so maybe like 4 hours, 3.5 hours, something like that.
Okay, and like how many people are renting that place?
So we just last year we had one of our tenants pass away. They were both on their pension, so the husband passed away. She's still in there. We lowered her rent because, pensions don't roll over 100% to their spouses. We had one person move out, and then we still had one that was under renovations. So I think as of last week, we actually have 5 out of 6 that are rented.
Mm. Oh, okay, okay. And every like from every tenant you get $1,000.
No, so the person who the call her um, the widow is actually paying something like 250 because
Oh.
they were paying 450 for like a studio apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then she's struggling. So really gave her a break. Uh, the person with the 3 bedroom, I think, is paying 980. One person just moved into the 2 bedroom plus den. He's paying around nine. And I think between that, there's like a 780 and a 800 in there.
Mm-hmm. So it's
Yeah,
basically,
it's
I would say
all
like,
under 1,000.
hmm, I got it. So it's basically like you make like monthly, I would say like near like 200K from the apartment. Sorry, I mean to say $2,000, not 200K.
Yeah. So we actually have a lot of renovation. So we have a renovation mortgage, we have the original mortgage, and then we put on a little bit more debt because this was a place that I mean, it all went, you know, there was a reason it went to foreclosure because they tried to renovate and things just got real. They opened up a can
Mm-hmm.
of worms and they left renovations halfway through and cut. So I did 10 years of interior system carpenter and I was a general contractor for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Um, the roof cost us some like $20,000. The renovation on one unit cost us about $40,000. And when we started, we had $50,000 in our bank account. We had to buy it outright, so we partnered with somebody else, put on a bunch of debt. We're essentially in debt, like $270,000 on this property. Um, that's including the rest of the mortgage that we had. And so now we're like paying close to $3,000 in mortgage alone without property management, without insurance. So we're just kind of treading water at this point for it. But once we have everything renewed into uh, more long-term mortgage, I think we should be making somewhere around, well, right now, somewhere between 15 and 1,800 a month in cash flow. And then once we have the last one, yeah, fairly close to $3,000 a month.
Mm, okay, okay, okay. So originally, like you paid, I would say like 300K or like including everything for the property which you have in Quebec.
Uh, yeah, I think originally something like 220, including like some of the renovations. A lot of it did end up becoming, debt that just compounded. Um, but I think, yeah, about 220 is fair out of pocket. And that one was kind of a unique situation because it was the foreclosure. It was foreclosed on 2 years prior to us getting it. And something a lot of people don't know is that banks don't do anything once they take ownership of a property after foreclosure. If there's a leak in the roof,
Oh.
that leak in the roof will stay there until somebody buys it. That's not their problem. It's not their prerogative. It's not their business. They will have that thing sit on market and rot until somebody chooses to buy it because all they want to do is uh, reconcile their lost income, uh, which gave us huge bargaining power because we knew that this was going to be a big job. We like gutted the basement. We had to fix the roof while people lived in there. There's 6 satellite dishes to like everybody's like, what are you gonna do with our satellite dishes? Can we keep our satellite? Some people are like having the little black box for their satellite, and we're like, look, we'll we'll work with you. But most people were paying under 600. So we're like, we're gonna do the renovations. We're going to fix the roof. We're gonna fix the leaks. We're gonna come rewire so many plugs. We'll replace the fridge, do all the things. But in exchange, do you think that like 800 is fair? Do you think 700 is fair? Do you think 950 is fair for the 4 bedroom? But well, maybe if you fix the porch or do this as well. It's like, great, okay, we can do that. Um, and so for the first 2 years, we struggled. It didn't make a whole lot of money. It barely made any money. I might have pulled out $100 in a month as like profit, and yet I was like, this has to go into a slush fund because by springtime, there's a bunch of things that need to be done on the exterior for
Mhm,
ourselves to feel safe.
mhm,
Um, but it is like a double lot. It backs onto another street. There is potential for development of another 6 unit there. It might take a couple of years to feel like we have the ability to like put it down on new plans, get permits in motion, and have enough equity to leverage to build a new unit there.
mhm.
But it
Oh, okay.
is in the plans, I am looking forward. I do feel very confident about this building in the next 5 years, or over the next 5 years.
So basically, you bought this building from bank.
Yeah, yeah. Bought it back from Desjardins, which is a credit union.
Okay, okay. So basically, I think it's a like kind of smart decision to buy this kind of building from bank, and then you can sell it like after maybe 5 years and get good money.
Yeah, so as if you do have the experience in construction or general contracting, um, it is nice. I've done this like twice now. The 7 unit is another foreclosure that we took on. But that's almost the other side of the coin of these things, right? So we bought it for 269,000. We have already put in an additional 200,000, and there's mold, there's like structural issues. All we wanted to do was change the heating from like oil to natural gas, because natural gas is way cheaper than trying to heat 7 units in oil. Um, and as soon as we started opening the walls, there's mold, there's water damage to not just like partitions, but to structural beams. And so we had to underpin pretty much the whole building just so that we could have this place as like a as livable, you
Mm.
know. Um,
So basically,
and
like
today we have not. Sorry,
you're
go ahead.
telling like most of the building which you like in general people buy from the bank, they are like damaged or like not fully renovated. Is it something like that?
I wouldn't say most. There are definitely some that are really good, and you can find tax auctions fairly regularly that, you know, sometimes it's a lot of empty lots. But sometimes you can find really good gems. So the Quebec one is a unicorn. Bought it for dirt cheap. People were very grateful and agreeable, once they got to know and see that we are here for the long run, as opposed to what happened with the last 3 owners of that place who just thought, yeah, we'll turn a quick profit. It won't be too bad. Um, Whereas the people in the 7 unit in Moose Jaw, they knew that like this place is going down to the ground. It is easier to just tear it down and build new. And there is a space to build like an 11 unit there. And the city is very much with the idea. They're willing to kind of steamroll the process a little bit for us. Um, but that wasn't our plan initially when we spoke to investors moving in on it. Our plan was, lower some of the costs by getting more efficient units, more efficient heating, and then splitting costs between units so that people can be in control of their own heat. Um, and that's not what happened whatsoever. We opened up a can of worms. It cost 3 times the amount that we wanted it to. We had to kick people out, which means we didn't have as much. Um, we just wanted to do a little bit of work on, each unit. Sorry, we'll be in here for a week or two, get you a hotel for the meantime. No, guys, there's serious mold, there's asbestos. We got to like quarantine the place, and oh, it's not what we wanted, you know. So we made deals. Everybody can come back for the same rent if they so choose. Um, that's but that's not a law that exists in Alberta. You can, or Saskatchewan, you can still do renovictions and be like, yeah, no, we're gonna renovate. You have 2 weeks to move out. Brutal. I don't want people to do this. It's disrespectful. You're just hurting your name. And like, yeah, not not a whole lot of people are going to do the research to find out what you did to the previous tenants. But in Quebec, you have the right um, to ask what your last tenant was paying, and you
Mm-hmm.
have every single right to demand that. And tenants have way more rights in Quebec than they do, I would say, anywhere else. Mind you, Ontario is starting to get there. And the only way to raise rents in Quebec, which is why Quebec is so cheap, is through change of use. So if you give a unfurnished, 2 bedroom, it's $1,000. It can be $1,000 for the next 10 years. But if
Oh,
you add appliances like stove, like a bed, I don't know, fireplace, whatever it is, you add some form of new use, which could include garden, gym membership, whatever it is. You can then charge additional. So then you can play that game of almost like turning the table of like it is now, you know, 1100 because we added a fridge and a stove, and then you remove the fridge and it's 1050, and then you add the fridge again and it's now 1150 every other year. But it's a whole process, and if you're doing it as like a person who's thrifty, great, do it in your duplex. That's fun. It's an easy way to like have some sort of certainties that your income will grow in Quebec. Though I always question the ethics of who does this. You know,
so basically, like
yeah,
you're telling
just
in Quebec, it's not profitable to, I would say, like buy an apartment, buy a house in comparison to other province.
yeah. If you want 100% profitability in a long-term strategy, Saskatchewan, Alberta, New Brunswick. If you're looking for uh, easy flips, uh, there is still a lot of potential in Ontario. I would kind of look at the outskirts of borders, though. Um, Quebec is a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder for flips. But if you know what you're doing, you have the experience and a team, you can easily do flips almost wherever you go, you know. But as somebody who's like, I'm 30 years old, I don't have my first home. I have
Mm-hmm.
a couple of
Mm-hmm.
apartment buildings, um, but I don't even own my home. You know, I find it really difficult because as a corporation, I can go in, throw 20% down, and they'll look at the building, especially if it's five and above, and say, if you don't do well, we're okay owning this building because it runs itself. You know, Whereas if I try to buy a home, they're like, there's no income here other than your own, and my income is sporadic. I land like 10 clients, I could make $40,000 in a month, but I could also go 3 months without having a single dollar come in, you know, and that's just wow. They consider 50% of the income from uh, my buildings, but since I don't actually pay myself a salary, it's not, you know, they consider 50% of it. So if I only pull dividends of, $1,000 a month if I wanted, um, they would only consider me having an income of $500 a month, which is not enough to own a car most days, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. COVID has just made things a little bit harder, especially as like a young person. It's $80,000 for a down for the average household in Ontario, maybe even 100. And then you need to be able to cover twice the amount of the mortgage from your personal income to be considered a low risk.
Right.
So that means you need to be making at least $4,000 to $5,000 a month on top of having $80,000. Unless you work in
Agreed.
tech, have successful podcast and or content, um, it's hard to make, 5 grand, that's $60,000 and it's 5 grand net. So that's 10 grand taxed, right? I don't know a lot of people who are 30 who make 10 grand a month.
No, no, it's
It's
not that easy.
$120,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially like in Canada, it's like a lot of taxes, right? So it's not that easy to make that much money.
Yeah. Unless you're an entrepreneur, um, where you're only taxed at the end of the year, then
Yeah.
it's a little bit easy, right? It's a little bit easier. You just need to find the right broker.
Right.
I have two on my team
Hmm.
that I consistently refer friends to that they'll just take like 3 or 6 months of your bank statements and see what your income is like and base you on that. So much easier.
Mm.
Then I can
Right.
show I have this business that makes income, this business that makes income, and I do constant renovations to upgrade the building and its value so that I also don't have to pay taxes on an additional 30 or $60,000.
Right. And it's something like if you're spending
And
like
something like if
thirty
you're
thousand
spending like
dollars for renovation, that you can tell government, hey, like I spent $50,000.
yeah, and as a general contractor, I actually write it off under a different company, so I just pay myself something else somewhere else,
Right.
which some people would say is crooked, but I also give up so much time in doing my finance business as well, or helping my girlfriend with her own business. She teaches good communication skills, how to listen, finding your vulnerable voice, authentic relating, a lot of good courses.
Hmm. That's good.
So
So basically, I thought like the hack is to buy a property from the bank, which is, I would say, like in a kind of not too much damage, but in a kind of damaged condition, and then like fix it and then sell it out.
yeah, so you can do the fix and sell. If you live in it, then you are exempt taxes for the first couple. Um, And if you also do the first time home buyer purchase, so anything under 5 units, you can qualify for the first time home buyers. They will add 50% of the income from your rent. So if you do end up doing multifamily and you get like a 4 unit, you live in one, fix it up a little bit over the year. Next year, do the other ones. Allow people to kind of upgrade their units as you go. This is really efficient, especially if you have, you know, experience or knowledge of friends who are contractors, tradespeople. Um, Super easy, super effective, and you get the lower rate. So in Canada, you have the CMHC, um, which allows you to do a 5% down, and CMHC will match 5%. So you can go up to 10, 15, and they'll match 5%. So if you do any kind of underwriting, I really like to use DealCheck. I think it's dealcheck.io. I want to say dealcheck.io, but it might be .com. I'm not quite sure. Um, oh, something just happened there. Sorry about that. I really like using that for underwriting. It allows you to do, I want to say 3 or 4, maybe up to 5 deals, and just plug in all the numbers. Make sure you have expenses, income, and this includes like laundry income, expenses like security. So that's something not a lot of people think of. Your insurance is based on rebuild value, not existing value. So that shocks a lot of people. But if there's a fire or a flood and you have to completely rebuild, you're going to want that insurance money. Um, Legal fees. You're going to do your accounting because if you do this higher than 5 units, you're doing it under a corporation, uh, which limits your liability. Do consider property management if even if you're going to do it yourself. I think the lowest I've seen is 7%. Standard is 10% of income. It makes a huge difference. If somebody slips and falls and you don't have property management, it falls on you. If it's in your personal name, it falls on you personally. If it falls on your corporation holds the property, which means they can sue you for the ownership of that property. Um, do work with a competent lawyer in this endeavor because you need two companies, a holding company and then the company that holds the property. Because if they sue the company that holds property, that holds nothing. Your holding company holds
Mm,
ownership of the property. Otherwise, if you have a property management, it falls on them. They take liability for the cost of 7 to 10% of the income. So if they do this pretty regularly, it works out. But it really is a low income kind of business, but it adds so much value.
mm. So like the property which you have in Saskatchewan, because a lot of people they like just invest nowadays like in Ontario, or I would say like in Quebec or maybe in BC, but nobody's looking toward
Mm,
Saskatchewan or Manitoba and all these places. So so what's your like
yeah.
take on the property which you have like in Saskatchewan? And are they like generating a good profit, or what do you see like in future?
Well, that's a really good question. Um, it's really hard to say. It really is. So like I've seen a lot happen in New Brunswick, which is probably why I'm looking at that now. As far as Saskatchewan, like I entered into this deal for 30% of that building with a friend of mine that
Hmm.
also helped me build an app for a different company. We met through real estate, and he was like, "Yeah, it'll be good." I had the money at the time. I saw really good returns because I think it was something like $40,000 a year in income, and then it would have cost me something like 70,000. I was like, well, if I get 30% of 40,000, that's in 10 years I'm back. Um, and in 5 years' time, I'd have my initial back. So I just thought it made sense. But it ended up being a can of worms. It's coming up to the 5 year mark. I haven't seen any money. It's still not done. Um, but I still feel fairly good about it. It took longer. Oh well. My plan is still long term. I'd like to be at a place where my real estate makes somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 monthly. That's my like financial independence number for myself. Um, so between that and my other companies, I just want to live a life where like 10, 15-hour weeks of work doing something that I really love doing uh, becomes like the norm. So how do I feel about it? Yeah, real estate, 100 years ago, if you could buy some, do it. It constantly goes up. Space is a limited resource that we have on this planet, but having a place closer to big cities, so Moose Jaw is not a big city, but it is a half-hour drive from, I want to say Battleford, probably saying that wrong, which is considered a bigger city in the area. So you got to look at markets especially if you're starting out, like secondary markets, tertiary markets, just outside of secondary markets, places where there is good economy, there is growth. You can look at the growth of a city pretty easily with Stats Canada. Um, and it's just a lot of research. Know what kind of strategy you're going into, um, and yeah, do some research. Like I said, some of my buildings took a year or more before I even closed on them. Took a
Mm,
year of getting into. each community, learning how it goes, where do people work, why do they choose to be here? Is there good schools? Is there transit? Is there really good restaurants? Is there easy access to groceries? Go to the grocery store. Try to figure out what it would be like to live there. And remember that not everybody is willing to live to your standard of living. Um,
Right, right.
you know, some people are like, I love the big city. I learned to love the country now that I know that there's community jam nights and uh, I like the peace and quiet. If you hear a car coming up the drive, that's scary. You're like, who's there? Uh, Whereas, back when I lived in Ottawa, I could fall asleep through shots being fired.
So
You
how
would
much
hear
you
shots
paid for
fired,
the
somebody something like that.
how much you paid for the your property in Saskatchewan and when you bought it?
Sorry?
How much you paid for your property in Saskatchewan, like the total price including everything?
Yeah, so it was about 269 when we bought it.
So you bought in
I think we're close to
2019.
500. Um, I want to say 2020. Yeah, maybe 2021. No, 2020. So we're about 5 years. It'll be 5 years next March. So 2020 in March. We've put close to 300,000, which makes us at the break-even point of it's appraised at 600,000 today. If we get it finished and rented, we might get something like 750, with the ability to generate maybe $2,000 a month.
So
That
currently
one
it's
is
renting, no?
right now it's empty. It's ongoing, complete gut. Uh, Once we get it fully finished, hopefully within the next year, we might be able to uh, refinance it because we bought that one outright for um 600,000 or something, pull out, hoping. So we might just break even. But if it generates a little bit of cash flow and continues to pay down its equity over the next 25, 30 years, we're well ahead.
Mm. So actually, do you think like it's because you bought in 2020 and still like it's going under renovation? So it's gonna be like it's a long time, no?
Yeah,
Like still waiting. It was so broken.
it is, yeah. And um like we were not expecting uh 3 years and have to go through permits and get the proper kind of people to one pull out the asbestos and then change structural beams. We went from wood to steel. Um, we had to raise more capital to do some of these renovations, and with everybody out of the building, we just couldn't do them as quickly as we had wanted to without taking on a lot more debt. Um, and we didn't feel comfortable putting that kind of leverage risk on ourselves. So it took longer, and this is why some of the foreclosures we have purchased have failed. Like the people prior to us who have foreclosed might have run into these kinds of issues where they're like, oh, a little bit of patch and paint, maybe add some, hydro unit, gas unit, or gas meters, sorry. Um, Maybe just upgrade some of the heating systems so it lowers the cost. And they open up a can of worms and they just go under because they couldn't, one, didn't like have enough of a preview of what was behind the walls, didn't get maybe as good an inspection as they could have. Um, I think I spent maybe close to $15,000 one year on inspections alone on deals I didn't even close. I only have two properties at this point, but I have
Wow.
looked at hundreds and I've walked away from far more. So some of them are deals that I'm so glad I never did because I've seen them go back on the market 4 months after they sell. And I was like, "Ooh, somebody ran into some issues. They just want to close the door on that." And then you're in a position where you almost have to take a bigger loss. So the best properties that you will do, you will want to sell. And some of the worst properties you'll do, you'll wish you could, you know.
So
So
how much
yeah,
money, like,
if you know,
as of now, how much
go ahead.
money you have like already spent on the renovation in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, close to 250, a little bit more. So almost as much as what we had spent on the building itself.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
now it's near about
And then
500K,
some.
right?
Well, if we get it all rented at market rents, then we could potentially get, 600,000, which is a win. You know, it's
Yeah.
not as sexy a win as we were hoping. We were hoping to buy 260 and then get 600,000 with, maybe 100,000 in upgrades. It was going to be really sexy. Uh,
But
Shit
when you're
happens.
but
I'm
when
just
you're
happy that
buying,
everybody was in uh, good enough morale and we talked like a team that, you know, nobody's hurt.
hmm. So
Um,
when you were buying, you guys didn't calculated that how much will be the renovation cost and how much we're gonna end up paying overall.
well, when we looked at it and when we got the report from the walkthrough, things were good, What and apparently we just didn't do as thorough a walkthrough or a thorough an inspection as we could have. Um, so pay the little bit of extra for for your contractor, get him to scan the walls, uh, going above and beyond is something we have to do now, without
Hmm.
question, which is why we probably lost a lot of money on, well, it's not lost, because now we know this will cost us way more than we had initially thought. Uh, so it's a better, yeah, this place was 11. uh, but it worked out because we worked through it rather than just give up and cut our losses. Um, we will come out a little bit ahead. It would just have taken a lot longer, you know.
So I would say like it's more, I would say like the inspection is a culprit.
Yeah. Yeah, do the inspection. Get a really good inspector. If he costs a little bit more, oh well, you'll know. You'll sleep better at night knowing that there isn't mold behind your walls. He'll like open up the outlets and kind of scratch around a little bit, and there's cameras. Do go over and beyond, especially if you think you're going to flip this in 3 months. I did construction. I've worked on like the Senate chamber for the House of Commons. I've worked on CRA buildings. I've worked on the train station. If
Wow.
anybody knows the train station in Ottawa, they know it took years longer than they said it would. And even now, they still have issues with the train. It's not my fault, guys. Um, Senate chamber, they say, oh, it's going to take X amount of millions in so many years, and it took twice as long and cost 4 times more. That's just the way things are because you run into things that you don't quite expect. You know, as I worked um, as a construction worker for better part of a decade, late teens up to my late 20s, um, mid to late 20s. And as much as there is a standard, very few things are thought of as a standard because the trades are so segregated that nobody really talks together, and then they just kind of work with what the other person left them with, and so nothing looks very standard or thought through, which causes a lot of angst, a lot of angst, and a lack of collaboration between trades, which just makes some buildings look like garbage. from the inside. On the outside, when you're not looking at the walls and the studs and how things are framed and whether or not you can move your toilet, you're like, that's pretty. I like the colors, the window seat. It's a nice little feature there. When you try to move your bathroom around so that you have a little bit more space in the master bathroom or master bedroom or whatever it is, and you're like, oh, there's not enough wire here, so now I got to open up all the way to the box and pull more wires, which just yeah, makes for a couple of days of extra work, which makes for delays on other things, and then it just it layers on. So for every 6 months, add 10%. Uh, for every 3 months of work, add 10% more time. For every 10% of time you add 30% of cost. And you might still end up, I'd rather you overestimate the costs than underestimate the cost.
Mm.
Underestimate the return, and if you come out ahead, great. You know,
From your experience in Saskatchewan, do you like think that buying property in the places like, I would say, like Saskatchewan or Manitoba, these kind of places, they're not like profitable? So instead of that, like that's why people are buying in Ontario and the big cities.
no, so I think so. Big cities. All right, let's get into buying in Toronto, buying in Montreal. There's this thing called the cap rate. So the lower the number, the cap rate, like Toronto might be 2%. Um, Small towns like just outside of where I grew up, this is like beyond tertiary markets. This is like markets you don't even want to think of. They'd be like 17%. Um, so if you increase, especially uh, in multifamily, you get to divide your income by the number of the cap rate, and that will give you an approximate value. There are other ways. There's like debt coverage ratios, and there's different
Wh-
formulas you can
What is that like
discover
cap rate?
to figure out. Yeah, you can look it up online. If you work with a realtor, they should know the area, and it's specific to neighborhoods. So let's say Toronto, you get a place, it costs $3,000 in rent per month, which I feel might be low for Toronto, and I feel very bad. My heart goes out to you. Um, so you divide or multiply that by, let's say a 3% cap rate, you get a value of 1.2 million. I don't know if that math is right. Don't, just throwing numbers out there to make a point. Um, and that can give you an idea of like, if I do X amount of renovations and can generate a new increased income, what kind of value can I look at? Like I said, there's debt coverage ratio. That's also a very important formula that you guys can look up. Um, so in places like Toronto, it is hard to turn a profit from just doing straight up renovations. It is a speculative town where you buy it because it generates appreciation, unlike, some small town like Curran. Uh, so in Toronto, you can have passive appreciation of something like 7, 8, 12%, depending on the neighborhood you're in, where every year it just generates new value without having to force any kind of appreciation through renovations or increased rents. Whereas Corinne or places in Quebec, because of the rent control, it doesn't generate. A building that was 320,000 last year is going to be 320,000 this year. 5 years
Oh,
from now, it could be 332,000. Whereas in Toronto, 10 years from now, that $1.2 million condo might be worth closer to like 1.8, you know, in
mm,
it's hard to look at that now, especially with COVID having done, my $700,000 building went for almost double. The initial offer was 1.5 and they talked us down to 1.3. Um, but it doubled just because of, I would say, geopolitical uh, pressures that just could not have been, foretold. Nobody knew COVID was going to hit. Nobody knew that people are like I'm going to get a single family home just about a half hour outside of town, so I'm an acre away from all my neighbors. Uh, you couldn't have foretold that. So big towns, you want to look at Vancouver, you want to look at Toronto, you want to look at Montreal. Lower cap rate means higher passive appreciation, but it also means if you do active or forced appreciation, it can generate very easy, very easy income. But there are 2 to 3 different formulas you should really know, which would be the cap rate and debt coverage ratio. I want to say there's a third one. It's just you know tip of my tongue, out of my head.
So the definition of cap rate is like how much percentage we can increase the rent.
No, so you're allowed. There is an interest allowance annually, so you can look up the definition of cap rate for you. Uh, Capitalization rate is the rate of return on a real estate investment property based on that income that the property is expected to generate. So let me give you the
Okay, okay. The money which property is
first
expected
the
to generate.
return on so the net operating income that the property generates. In other words, capitalization rate is a return metric that is used to determine the potential return on investment or payback of capital.
Hmm.
Uh, it is over largely used, but in large cities where it's more speculative, it is definitely one that you would want to consider. If you're looking more like secondary markets, tertiary markets, just outside of big cities, Kingston, Rockville, we're talking about around Ottawa, and I don't know Montreal well enough, or I don't know the surroundings of Montreal well enough. But if you look in secondary markets, it's still applicable. In tertiary markets, far less so. You know, then you really have to look at or work with an investor-focused realtor team, even getting property management to give you a quote um, is huge.
So someone who wants to suppose like invest in real estate in Canada, because the situation what we see nowadays is like, yeah, there are properties which are like appreciating in like Toronto or maybe like Vancouver, but it's not like, everyone's cup of tea, right? Because it's like very expensive, right? So, but
Oh
still,
yeah.
yeah, so people want to still invest in real estate because they want to make money and they can be like wealthy. So what's the strategy like? What are the some places which can be, like where they can look for investing?
So where to look for to invest. So like I said, New Brunswick uh, does have a very low in. If you're looking at like to do this yourself, your first time, you want to do first home buyer. That means you'd almost have to live there. Um, Otherwise, 20% down. I have seen like duplexes, like triplexes, even up to like a fourplex in New Brunswick for under, 400,000.
Hmm.
So if you do 20%, you're like 80,000 for a fourplex that'll generate, I don't know, 2,400. It essentially pays itself. If you're doing it to like build up equity and build long-term wealth, you can you can probably make it work at 15%. That's using the first time home buyers initiative, but that would mean moving in. So if you're okay to live in New Brunswick for a year, take a sabbatical, Um, definitely, definitely a doable strategy. If you're just looking to put 20% down and have property management generate that kind of level of security of income, I can actually get you into contact with a good friend of mine, Massey. It's Murray Massey. Keep saying his name backwards. I just love the way it sounds. Um,
So
and he
she's in
is a
Moncton.
general contractor. He's Yeah, I want to say Moncton. But New Brunswick's not that big. It's not that big. There's only three real main towns, and he'll travel. He
I
does still
lived
have
in
a
New
lot of
Brunswick
contacts
for
in.
1.5 years actually.
Oh yeah, oh, that's great. I still haven't like I went through. I was going to go to Newfoundland for a wedding. Um, and was stopped in Halifax, and they're like, "Yeah, there's a hurricane coming. We might. You can make it on the island. You might not make it back for a couple weeks though." It's like, I only took the like 2 weeks off to drive across. Do the wedding and then drive back, and it was beautiful. But haven't spent that much time. So yeah, I can get you into contact with a couple of different people uh, in that area who have teams developed. If you are looking to just invest and you're like, I only have 25 or 10,000 or whatever it is, there are REITs that you can find. There's REC, I get emails from them all the time. There's a variety of ways. You can also do joint venture agreements, which is what I've kind of started with,
Oh,
as low as sometimes 10,000. You're essentially syndicating funds. So let's say you wanted to invest, you had something like 20,000 or 30,000, and I had a building that I was going to purchase. I say, this will cost us, let's say for my 6 unit, as an example, had we done a joint venture, including more people, um, so my in was like 100,000. I essentially bought the building outright. Somebody paid the additional 120,000 for construction renovations, so on and so forth, and then we put on a little bit of extra debt. So in total, it's 240,000. 50% goes to uh, the people who are boots on the ground, active partners, and then the other 50% goes to investors. Now,
hmm.
this is just very basic. In some situations, it might be more like 65% goes to investors if it's, a low hands-on process. If it's like a new build and you're like, wow, 70% will go because there's not a whole lot of hands-on for the active partner since it's new. It'll be 15, 20, 30 years before you need to do any kind of active management, renovations or general contracting or that kind of thing. Um,
So
but let's
there
just
are
say,
some.
joint venture agreement. Uh, you can do a variety of things. You can invest through your RSPs. You can invest through your TFSA. You can invest in flat cash. You can do promissory notes, um, and do a variety of methods. So you can do for equity, which is what I typically do. So you gain long-term growth as well as a portion of the cash flow, typically paid out quarterly or annually, depending on the size of the deal and the size of the company you're dealing with. And or you can just do straight interest, which is what you can do through your RSPs and TFSAs. There's very specific companies that you need to deal with to be able to do these types of things. The most common one, I think, would be Olympia Trust. You can also do it through, you can get a lawyer if you want. Babette Turner in Ottawa is one that I know and trust to do RSP mortgages. Kind of need a lot in your RSP, so that's more for later term or longer term people. Um, and you can do straight interest as promissory notes. So I do have a couple that I work with quite a bit through my girlfriend, and they'll take, let's say, round numbers, $100,000. They pay somewhere between like 12 and 15% annualized monthly. So every month you get, you know, whatever 100,000 works out to, I think 1250 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of your term, whether that be 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, they get your initial back. So
Mm.
15% over a 5 year term, that's good money. It's
Yeah,
fifteen
that's really
thousand
good.
dollars a
And
year.
like, and it doesn't depend on like the year, right? Suppose if I'm investing in ETF or maybe mutual funds, in order to get that much return, I need to probably wait for 10 years, right? Then only in average return, I'll get like 15%. But the thing which you are telling, I think this is like something, like it doesn't, you don't have to wait for 10 years or something, right? You can have agreement for 1 year and 2 year, and they will tell you how much return you can get.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can do structured based like contract based on an interest rate. You can do 12 up to 15%. It's deal specific. Um, in REITs, you can generally expect something between like 8 and 10%, which is really good. If you're just starting out and you're like, I only have $1,000, then yeah, there's great ETFs for that that give you exposure to real estate. There's some funds like I work a lot with Industrial Alliance, Avari, and they have some funds that get into real estate. But doing so privately can get you higher funds. They are higher risk though, depending how it's underwritten. Um,
Oh, okay.
get all the papers checked out by a lawyer, please.
So you're
Um,
telling like I cannot invest like blindly, like, okay, this is the company, good company. I can give you like 10 grants and you can, give me this much return. No, it doesn't work like that.
yeah, well, so you can invest blindly in ETFs that don't
Yeah.
generate anything and just drop quickly. Do your due diligence. That's really is on you. If you want, I can make some calls and do some introductions and get you in front of a few people that I've known who have been around for over a decade, have been doing great. Um,
No,
yeah,
for ETF, I know like you can get also like a bunch of YouTube videos. You can understand how much they're doing and all. But for the thing which
yeah,
you're telling, like, like I specific forgot the
more private sector.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Private sector, where they're gonna like generate money from different people, and they will invest in a property, and they'll tell you that, okay, you are in like 1 year agreement, and we're gonna give you like 12% of yearly like annual appreciation, and then I'll
yeah.
give you initial back after 1 year. So for that, you need to like do some kind of research on. It's not like you can invest like blindly with like no brainer like that, right?
No, and like I have facilitated for some of my clients as my in my finance business. They're like, look, I really love the funds we've placed. Some of them generate 12%, some of them generate I did a review with a client and I think it was at 17.8%, but these are just very high risk, high
Hmm.
reward. But if you have a uh, long-term view, it's fine. And he's like, I have an additional 25,000 that I'd like to, place somewhere. And I was like, okay, well, what are you open to doing? What's your like risk tolerance? He's like, well, I wouldn't want to lose it for more than a year. Um, and I'd like to generate a little bit higher than 10%, if possible. So I shopped around and called a bunch of buddies. Hey, what are you doing? Do you know anyone needing a construction loan, 25,000? And I found him the ability to do a construction loan with a company that was fairly reputable. Um, it was a 6-month contract, 15%, so 7.5% over the term. And yeah, it worked out great. You know,
So is it
and he's
easy
like,
to
that was
find
fun.
this
I was
kind
like,
of
well, great.
company?
I'm part of a few different paid communities. Um, today, I think it costs something like 25,000 to join, but it's a lifetime membership, and so I just kind of facilitate uh, for people, my clients, friends, family who are looking to get into real estate without having to learn all the skills to keep up in real estate. Because guys, this is not some easy hack. There's a lot of laws involved. There's a lot of researching. There's a huge learning curve. And yes, there's a lot of courses that teach you how to buy your first property in under a year. I've done 3 of those, and every time I learn something new. And still, I do not want to be active anymore. I want some peace of mind. I don't want to be woken up at 3 o'clock to go plunge somebody's toilet because they pay their rent, and if they leave it, it's going to be left. It's a dirty job. There's a lot to do, and there's a lot to know, and I
Suppose I
spent
have like
years trying to do this.
$10,000 and I wanted to
Mhm.
invest in like privately, not like ETF or maybe a mutual fund, something like that.
Yeah,
And I wanted to make return of, okay, like just take it like I would say a little bit of safer, maybe 10%. I would not go like 18% or 15%, 10%. So how is the
sure.
like likelihood? Is it
Yeah,
a risky thing, like, to invest in a company, maybe like to find a company who can help in that?
yeah. So smaller things like 10,000, 15,000, even up to 20,000 is difficult to place, because one, nobody wants to raise, $500,000 in $10,000 chunks. If you
Mm-hmm.
have to split, let's just say for the sake of ease, 10,000 $10,000 a month into 50 different checks, that's a lot of paperwork that you have to do quarterly. So what people will do is, set somebody. What I would do is set somebody like you into your own joint venture. You and, let's say five friends, or a group of five, where you collect 50,000 together, and then you operate as one entity. You create a numbered corporation, cost you 300, $600. Everybody owns their fair share, and then from there you go in together, $50,000, and that generates 10%. So it's still 10% per, whatever. But then you guys do that division. You can get into bigger deals that are simpler, and then that way that
Oh,
person only deals with 10 representatives. Um, and you'd work that way. I think that would be way simpler and would allow you more access. Um, and like I said, if you have anybody who shows up and are curious about hearing more, I can definitely facilitate getting into the right kind of rooms and showing you different options with my community. I think we're close to 800 large across North America now. And at one of the last, I'll say, symposiums that we did, I think we had closed, I'll say, somewhere around $263 million real estate last year.
mm. Oh, okay, okay. That's really great.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. I feel bad that I don't have more in there, but once I get a couple refis, I did just get engaged, so now my mind is more like, what are we going to do for the wedding? Um, I do still have a goal, have a dream of generating enough income from real estate alone to um, finance our early retirement. But I'm also okay with adding great value to people in their lives. And yeah, I currently enjoy my job a lot, teaching people how to
Mm.
retire and save for retirement, invest. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think that's it. I learned like a lot of things, and I think people who will watch it, they also learn a lot of things. They also learn a lot of things. I think like it's really great to, because I never had like conversation with anyone who belongs to real estate, and I really got a lot of insight from you. So thank you so much for all the information and coming here.
Yeah, for sure.